Hello, welcome everybody. We're just going to start our webinar. Welcome to our webinar. I'm just going to hang on for a few minutes just to let everybody join. I don't know whether I'm ahead of time or not. I don't think I am. I think we're pretty much bang on 3:30. So let's just wait and see how many people we get turning up. Okay. Well, we're getting a few people turning up now, so I think we will proceed. Welcome to our webinar, the latest in the series we've been doing, just really following the pattern of our very strange working lives for the last year and a half, it nearly is now. And along with me today, I've got some other panelists who are going to discuss where we are today. I'd just like them to introduce themselves. I'm going to start first of all just to say hello to Fiona. Fiona's not going to join us on the panel, but she is going to be answering any questions that people might have. Fiona, do you want to just say hello?
Hi, I'm Fiona. So if you've got any questions, do feel free to use the chat facility. If I can answer them, I will. If not, or you specifically like one of the panelists to answer the question for you, just let us know and we'll see what we can do.
Lovely, thanks Fiona. Perhaps next I could go to Murray Preston of Blackrock. Would you like to introduce yourself to us, Murray?
Yeah, thanks Richard. So as Richard says, Murray Preston at Blackrock. I'm based here in our Edinburgh office. I run, I'm in a team called Global Provider Strategy and cover the EMEA and APAC regions. So in terms of what that does, it's old style vendor management, I think, is probably to liken it best.
Lovely, thanks Murray. Next I'm going to turn to Peter Christmas at NatWest Trustees. Peter?
Yeah, hi Richard, hello everyone. Yes, Peter Christmas. I'm Director of Client Management at NatWest Trustee and Depository Services, where I look after all of the existing client relationships as well as the business development for our UK business. And I've been with NatWest Trustee and Depository Services for about 5 years and in the custody industry for about 33, something like that.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Peter. I seem to think I've been around at least as long as that, but I'm not going to mention exactly how long. Let me come next to Tim Wood at Cooper Wood. Tim.
Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon. I'm Tim Wood from Cooper Wood and Associates. We're a specialist asset servicing consultancy, and our clients are asset managers, asset owners, and asset services. And what we do is help all of those clients optimize their revenue and cost lines and get better value from their relationships.
Good, thanks, Tim. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is we ran a survey recently. What did we do at the end of May, early June, just to get some feedback on how everybody was getting on work-wise. So I'm just going to quickly run through the results with you, and if I can find the right buttons. Okay, so our webinar today, what we're going to do is just quickly run through the results of our hybrid working survey and then get the view from our panelists, as we just found out, that Murray, Peter and Tim. If anybody's got any Q&As that they'd like to ask us, please do so via the link and we'll endeavour to answer them as best we can. We've also got a couple of quick polls for you, just to find out how things are going for yourselves. And then we're going to wrap up. So we're looking at a run time, we think, of about 40 minutes, but we'll see how we go. So on the hybrid working survey, what we did was, first of all, just find out where people are currently working. Roughly 2/3 are working from home all the time. About 1/3 are working from home part of the time and part in the office. A relatively small percentage are working from in the office full time. So not surprisingly, we asked, are there going to be plans to change that over the next few months? And clearly as things begin to ease a little bit, as lockdowns begin to ease, as vaccinations take place across the developed world, there are going to be plans ahead, not surprisingly, for nearly 80% of everybody expecting that to change as we move forward. So most people expect to increase the amount of time they spend in the office. Again, not really very surprising. And also few are going to return full time. There seems to be a bit of a balance between the two, whether it's going to be sort of 2 days in the office and 3 days at home, or the other way around, 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. The survey respondents we got, we're really quite geographically diverse from North America, Europe, and Asia, and it seemed to be that it will vary very much as local lockdown arrangements ease and as government controls change in terms of what they're expecting people to do. And also, I think it was a number of people expressed the desire that they didn't really want to get back into the office until they've had their double vaccination, or indeed probably travelling to and from. So in terms of target dates for that to happen, September seems to be the most common target date, with Labour Day having been mentioned by some US respondents as being their target date. So that, of course, is early September. And I guess for a lot of people in Europe, it's going to be the return to school of school kids at the end of summer holidays in most countries. One Boston-based manager said voluntary hybrid model in July and August, which they'll revisit in September, and it's likely that everybody will be back in the office for at least 3 days a week come September. A London-based manager said that following a staff survey, we expect to run a hybrid model going forward, people being required to spend at least 2 days a week in the office, one of which will be an anchor day when all staff will be required to be in. The second day will be a floating day at the individual's discretion. People will be required to attend the office for client and company meetings or when requested to do so. And that kind of makes sense to me. If everybody's coming in and out on different days, you won't necessarily always get the chance to meet. But if you do have this idea of an anchor day when everybody is going to be there, that kind of works, I would have thought. We were also interested to know whether or not the suggested changes that companies were putting in place, whether the individual responding to us agreed with that. And by and large, a large majority of people do agree with the changes that are going through. A relatively small number, about a fifth of them, was saying that they don't agree. And I think there is a variety of different reasons for that. I think majority are happy with the proposals being put forward, and that those that disagree are either saying we want a hybrid system and they're not being offered one, or the other way around, they're being offered a hybrid system, and in a few cases they actually want to work in the office more often than they work from home. And there's also another question that did arise for the minority who don't wish to be vaccinated. Will it be mandatory for them to have that before returning to the office? Another question we asked was on the topic of public transport, how comfortable people were using it. And 60% of people were saying that they were comfortable, and only 20% saying that they weren't. And I think for those cases where people were saying that they were happy, it was fine. Those who were not so happy were basically talking about using alternative methods of getting there, whether that's using their own car or walking or running in was mentioned by a number of people, just trying to find other ways around the problem. And a number of people did comment on the amount of time it takes to commute, saying that in fact they're probably going to be less productive because they're going to be spending that bit more time doing the commute. And they were also hoping that the rush hour might be less crowded than it was before. We also asked about what changes have been made in the way the office is arranged. And I think what's transpired from that is that the function of the office over the years has always evolved. And what's happened in the last 15 months has not made a massive sea change, but it's perhaps speeded up an evolutionary process with more hot desking, more collaborative areas, and more portable technology, laptops rather than desktops, for example. But what clearly has made a big difference is the need for increased hygiene, for social distancing, one-way systems, queues for lifts, all that sort of stuff. So we asked people what the biggest work challenge was going to be for the rest of 2021. And I guess probably because they've just been going through this survey, their minds were very much on the whole working from home, working in the office scenario. So most people suggested that returning to the office was going to be the biggest work challenge, managing teams, motivating people, adjusting to physically working alongside others, which we haven't done for quite some time now. And also traveling for work, again, not done for a while. Some client comments we got here, some feedback. Managing a team remotely in already very difficult circumstances, which will only get harder when there is hybrid working. Somebody did mention that continuous flows of regulations, and I think that's been an ongoing work challenge for quite a few years now. Team building, as we've had to had new team members joining in the past year, it's not always been easy to train and support them and build rapport by telephone or by Zoom. Somebody else also mentioned the workload and email traffic needs to reduce to be sustainable, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that. So in summary, there is an acceptance of the need and indeed even a desire to return to the office for a few days a week. The exact balance between home and office working is very fluid and will vary according to, say, personal circumstances, the type of job that you do, and also, importantly, what your senior manager want to happen. Some people want to stay at home more so they can time with parenting responsibilities, for example. Others want to go in at least 3 or more days a week, and I think of those people, you know, perhaps a couple sharing a 1-bedroom flat, both trying to work from home, could be a bit of a strain. Most people still envisage that there will be questions and problems still to be answered. The question of whether or not vaccination should be made compulsory is a political time bomb for most companies, and indeed I would say for most governments too, wondering what to do about it. Nevertheless, the last 16 months have shown people can adapt and are prepared to keep adapting as circumstances change. So that's the summary of the survey and the findings we had. As I said, that's all pretty fresh because we did it in the last few weeks, and we wanted to get out and broadcast those results to everybody, let you know what they are. So perhaps I could just turn to Murray just to see what reflections you might have on that and how that ties in with your own experience.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, obviously recognise a lot of those comments. And the numbers voting for the various options. We have completed a biannual employee opinion survey, and that data has just been collated and will be shared with all staff shortly. And I truly don't expect it to differ too much from some of that. You know, Blackrock's a global company with, you know, multiple presence in Europe, in EMEA, also in clearly in North America, South America, and also in APAC. So it will vary from you know, not just, you know, country to country, but city to city within those countries. In terms of EMEA, if I could just focus on that for a minute, our current numbers that are in the office are relatively small. In Budapest, London, and Edinburgh, 3 largest offices in EMEA. You know, it's varying around about, you know, 7%. It's anything from 2% to 10%, depending on, you know, varying from day to day. There are strict restrictions in place you have to gain approval to enter the office, so that we can you know, closely monitor those. In terms of, I mean, I'll say it, but everybody's the exact same. We've got all the same sorts of restrictions in place. You know, around hygiene, around kind of some parts are one-way systems, etc. So just the same as every other office, whether it be small or large. And in terms of the return, we're calling it future of work. No great surprises. So we're planning, and this is globally. The recommendation to staff is that there's 3 days in the office and 2 days working from home. Now, in that last, I think second last page you just threw up there, it will vary. It will really vary in terms of the you know, type of role you perform within the firm, type, you know, the interaction you have with either people internally and externally. Obviously, clients being a key one. So it will vary from role to role. But Blackrock have been very good so all the way through this process. They've tried to listen to what the staff have said or suggesting, but it's fluid, and it'll continue to be to change. In terms of Europe, and again, just looking at the 3 main offices, we're all targeted for Budapest, London, and Edinburgh all to have a full return on the 4th of October, and that will be in this guise of what we're calling future of work. So between that, it's going to vary a little bit in July, August, and September, as we begin a period of reacclimatization, or our staff do, and obviously that's the expectation is going to build through to the end of September, beginning of October. We also, I think I mentioned this back in March, and a lot of firms are doing the same thing, so it's nothing new. But we have split effectively the whole firm into 50-50. We have a team black and a team rock, so we're continuing to adhere to those principles of whoever's been kind of selected for which 50% and the other 50%.
Good, thanks very much, Murray. That's an interesting thought, having 2 teams, 1 black, 1 rock. I don't quite know what Fiona and I are going to do. I think I'll be Team R and Fiona can be Team M or something like that. Anyway, let me come across to Peter and ask the same question. What's your take on it?
I think, like Murray, I recognise quite a lot of what was in that survey from what I've been hearing. Just kind of take it in reverse order, I guess, starting with our return to work. We're doing a sort of phased return to work from September. Obviously, this is in the UK and it's dependent on local regulation, etc. But what we've done is we've said, broadly speaking, we're going to have people who are defined as office first. And an example in a broader banking context might be somebody who works in a cash processing center or something like that, where you need people physically there. So their primary place of work will be the office. They'll be in 4 or 5 days a week in the office. You've then got people who are defined as home first, where they need less time in the office. Some of our second line colleagues, for example, will be defined as home first, where they're looking more like 2 days a month, something like that in the office. And then you've got the middle, which is hybrid, which is either 2-3 or 3-2. The part of the business I work in is clearly hybrid. A couple of things that I think though is that, so I think there's a lot of difference between big firms and small firms. So, I think Murray and I would have a lot of commonality in some of the things that we're going through. There's some small firms that are pretty much already back in already, because actually for them it's really important. They're a small company that everyone needs to know what everyone's doing. So, there are some of the small asset managers, some of the alternative managers and hedge funds who've had a lot of people in the office all the way through. So there's definitely a difference between big firms and small firms, probably the big firms taking a more cautious approach. I also think it's going to evolve. So, if I look at myself and my team, we're client facing, we're allocated 2-3 days a week in the office, probably 3 days a week. But actually, well, the first thing is, will we be in the office or will we be at our clients? And we'll only be at our clients if our clients are in the office. So, people like me are very dependent on what people like Murray and his teams are doing, because they're the people that we're going to go and see. So there's and that is all, I think that's going to evolve and change. So we've got, some of the press we've seen coming out of the US where it's, some of the investment banks, you're all back in the office by whatever date it is, to a more cautious approach in Europe. But I think on the client-facing side, we're very, very dependent on what our clients are doing, because we want to be able to go and see our clients. I spoke to a couple of weeks ago, what I would describe as a mid-sized firm, and they're really looking at things. So around team building, that's a really important thing. How do you get people into the office? How do you get people interacting with each other? And what they were actually saying is, if you've got a team in multiple locations, then most of your team meetings should be at home, because otherwise you end up with what we've all seen before lockdown. If you've got the majority of people in one location and then some satellite locations, all the discussion happens in the room where everyone's in the one location, and the other people feel cut off. So actually what they were saying is, what we should do is we should actually, in that situation, everyone should be either at home or in an individual room, such that everyone feels that they've got an equal opportunity to contribute, which I thought was quite interesting. I think the final thing I was going to say is actually, I think the change in office space will be significant, certainly in the banking sector, and significant for the better. Because a lot of banks over the last 10 years have gone to this just rows of desks. And it might be hot desking or not, but that's kind of all there is in the odd little meeting room. I think actually we're going to see much better working spaces, a lot more collaboration spaces, which maybe have existed in the asset management industry, but not so much in banking. So actually, I think I'm expecting the offices to be actually much better and much more vibrant when we do go back.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Some interesting points there. I think, you know, also, as you said, both you and Murray working for large organisations, and clearly some plans have been put in place. What we got feedback on the survey was that I think not all companies are in that position, and indeed, if they have already made plans, in some cases they're not being communicated that well to some of the staff, I suspect. Anyway, let me turn now to Tim. Tim, do you want to give us your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. I mean, it seems clear that the novelty of remote working or working from home has worn off for an awful lot of people, not everybody, but for an awful lot of people. And I think as a result of that, people are keen to go back to work. Where the challenge lies is the clarity and rules of engagement, if you like, around what hybrid working really means. So if I'm someone who likes working from home, so therefore I'm not coming back to the office at all, my hybrid working is 0 out of 5 days, versus the other person who can't wait to get back to the office and they want to do 5 days a week, then you're going to come up, yes, the challenge number one will be what's fair for everybody, because they'll start causing kind of resentment within the office of why is he allowed to work from home 5 days a week and I come in no days a week, etc. And as one of your respondents referred to the anchor day, I think this is absolutely critical, because that's the day when you can have everybody in the office on the same day and deal with all of the kind of comms, team building, you know, get everybody on the same page. Because if you leave it too fluid for everybody to make their own choices about when they're coming in and what they're going to do when they come in, and that's the next point is, you know, I think someone said on one of the previous panels, there's no point in coming in to spend a day doing your emails. That's the stuff you should be doing at home. And so therefore make the time you do spend in the office much more productive. And this is all about removing the ambiguity. You know, in the end, you know, it's a bit like school children. The rules need to be very clear and people either like them or they won't like them, but they'll at least know where they stand. And I think this, you know, Peter referred to it'd be an evolving process. And I absolutely agree with that. It will be. But to start with, if you leave it too fluid, too ambiguous, people will just find it confusing and frustrating. And, you know, you'll get into those situations I referred to before when you're going to have people say, oh, well, you weren't here the other day, but me and these other 3 guys, we had a meeting and we've decided all of this stuff, but you were working from home, weren't you? So you weren't involved in that. And so there's got to be some, yeah, I wouldn't really use the word discipline, but some kind of understanding of what's good practice and what's not good practice in this whole kind of new hybrid environment. And so, you know, be clear about when people should be in the office and when they shouldn't be, what are the exceptions? And, you know, even something as simple as the anchor day, let's say it's a Wednesday, you know, there's going to be a group of people to say, well, Wednesday doesn't work for me because that's my email day, or that's the day I have to take the kids to school, or whatever it is. And so, you know, even something as simple as picking an anchor day could be fraught with all kinds of anxiety for people. So I think this is going to take some time to bed down. What seems like something very, very simple of bit of home, bit of work in the office stuff will actually throw up all kinds of problems from the usual people who always come up with the problem rather than the solution to these, which every office has those people.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I'm just trying to wonder now whether I was one of those people when I worked for a bigger organisation. Maybe I was. I don't really know.
I'm sure you weren't.
Anyway, I think it might be a good opportunity now just to ask. I'm very curious. I'd like to ask our attendees whether they just do a little poll here, whether they've been into the office at all this year. Because you know, I do wonder whether some people have not been in at all. I think others started going in quite a lot. So I'll just keep that running for a second so we get everybody giving us a response. Okay, so we'll call it there. So it seems that most people have been in a little bit. Fair chunk of people haven't been in at all, and a smaller percentage have been in, you know, quite a few times. So that was one poll I wanted to do. Now I wanted to, if I can get to the other poll we did. I don't know how to do that. How do I do that? Fiona, any ideas? Because I wanted to find out how many people have actually had a face-to-face business meeting.
Polls. I've just got access to it, so close that one. Where's the other one gone?
I don't know. I'm missing it. I'll leave that with you to search around for a moment and see if we can find it, because I think it is quite interesting. So maybe I could ask our panelists whether they've been into the office at all, and indeed whether they've had any face-to-face business meetings. Murray, how about you?
The answer is very simple: no and no. You know, I'm lucky to live and work in Edinburgh. It's about 20-25 minute journey, but by bus, because I'm all about the green, into the office. So it's not anything like Brighton to London to central London. But saying that, I only got my second JAG. Sorry, we call it JAG up here. Apologies. Second vaccine about three weeks ago. On a personal level, I'm in my late 50s. I have a couple of underlying issues, and I thought, why? And as I said earlier on, the average number of folks that have been in the Edinburgh office in the last few months has been around about 2%. So it's not as if, you know, I would be encouraged to go into the office if more people were there to actually physically meet people, catch up with them in person. But I'm just resigned to the fact that I'm just going to keep going with this. In my role, I do a heck of a lot of traveling, so that's clearly something I've not been doing for the last 15 or 16 months. But by and large, it's been okay. You know, whether it's you know, Zoom, WebEx, you know, or other options, the technology is pretty good. And Tim made a really good point. Sorry, I think it was Tim. My apologies. That if we, at this point, we don't revert to the old ways of doing things. That if you had 80% of the people actually physically in an office, in a room, then it's very, very hard for people dialing in on audio or video to actually actively participate. You miss so many things. You miss all the body language, for starters, of which there can be a lot, as we know, and it's a big part of human nature. So you miss that element of it, and you find yourself, you know, you're waiting for your opportunity to try and get your point, or make your point, ask a question, etc. So at this moment, actually, it works kind of quite well, being all virtual. But the challenges will come, as Tim and I think Peter mentioned as well, that as we move back to some sort of normality. So as I said, that's some of the rationale behind my decision on both fronts this year to date.
Yeah, thanks, Murray. Actually, whilst you were talking, I managed to work my way around the polls and launch that one just to find out whether people have had any face-to-face business meetings as well. The results on that was 45% people saying they haven't had any, 45% saying they'd 1 to 5, and 9% saying they'd had more than 5 face-to-face meetings. And that's interesting, because I actually had my first face-to-face business meeting about 2 weeks ago, which did involve travelling into London, which is, for me, is quite quite a challenge because I've got to come up from Somerset. But anyway, it was nice to get back into the real world and actually sit down and talk to people. It just brought home to me that you really can't replicate sitting down opposite a table with someone and having a proper meeting. Anyway, perhaps I could come across to Peter and ask him what it's been for him.
Yes, so I had my first trip to London and face-to-face meetings last week. One of them was with somebody that joined my team about 6 weeks ago that I'd never met. And one was with I would say, kind of client stroke industry contact. I guess my observation, and I'll try to sound cynical here, but actually the people who are going into the office that are now on a regular basis, the people who want to go into the office, and mostly are client-facing people who are going into London to meet other client-facing people, because actually, as far as I could work out, none of my clients, because I've reached out to a lot of clients and said, you know, would you like to meet up? No, we're not actually in the office, a bit similar to Murray, but actually I can meet up with lots of client-facing people. Also, maybe again, slightly cynically, I feel that most of the people who really want to be in the office are people of, let's say, my age, who are used to going into London, have been doing it for many, many years and kind of miss that contact. And I talk to a lot of people from that group effectively, who are, as I say, generally going into London and meeting with other client-facing people, because most of the operations and supplier oversight people that I would work with as clients actually are not back in the office yet.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? I think one of the respondents to the survey was saying that he was in his mid-50s and he was wondering whether, if I think given his age, he was more accustomed to working in the office, and he was actually thinking, if he doesn't go back into the office more regularly, then maybe early retirement is going to be one of the options for him. So anyway, let me ask Tim. I know you've had some meetings, you were telling me that the other day. So anyway, tell us your point of view.
Yes, I'm one of the 9% in your poll, and we have been having, and we've deliberately been trying to have face-to-face meetings when we've been allowed. And as Murray said, there is no substitute for face-to-face and, you know, just body language and just, you know, looking people in the face, in the eyes. But what's been interesting is, and this is all in London, in central London, is the general uptick in activity of people, volume of people in the city has been gradually creeping up ever since I've been going in there for face-to-face meetings. It's still fairly much a ghost town most of the time, but I have noticed more and more people, and certainly the outdoor cafes and restaurants seem to have a lot more people in them than previously, which I think is encouraging. So people are drifting back. I mean, it's certainly nothing like it used to be, and it's quite sad in many respects seeing the city so empty. I mean, one well-known restaurant and bar at the Bank Junction, number 1 Lombard, I mean, used to be absolutely rammed from 7:30 in the morning till late at night. You know, Rod Cooper and myself had a meeting there a few months ago with someone at 8 o'clock for breakfast, and we were there for other meetings for most of the morning. And for a large part of that time, we were the only people there. I mean, it was really surprising that they even bothered opening. And again, we had another meeting there more recently when things should have been a bit busier. And again, there was only 3 or 4 people in there. And this was a place that used to be, you know, absolutely packed out day and night, every single day. So I think there's a long way to go. But, you know, there are people, and you are right, Peter, you picked up on there's a certain age group of people who almost feel responsible or have a responsibility to go back and start trying to make things happen. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a general, a quiet but general uptick in the amount of people who seem to be back in London.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yes, I did. Well, it being my first venture into Canary Wharf the week before last, well, I'd heard stories of how desolate it was. There did seem to be a few people moving around, but it's still a hell of a lot emptier than it ever used to be. I was there seeing one of the providers, and they were saying that they were coming into the office, but they were mainly coming into the office to have lunch. And that's not meant in a cynical way or to be boozy lunches, but they felt they wanted to go and see clients, and probably the best way and most effective way of doing that, most COVID-friendly way of doing that, is actually just to go out for lunch with somebody, sit around the table. So, Murray, have any of the providers been trying to get physical meetings with you?
No, I was going to make a flippant comment, but I better not. No, they're all very comfortable at the moment, and that's still the case, I would say, Richard, as well in the USA and Canada. APAC, I'm aware of a face-to-face meeting on Monday there with a couple of senior folks. So I think in certain cities in APAC, there's a little bit increase in face-to-face meetings, but not much. And certainly in Europe, not seen anything yet. And the banks seem to be very comfortable with that. The providers seem to be very comfortable with that, and we're certainly very comfortable with that. We've settled into a good routine. It's been difficult, very difficult. We have undertaken a lot of big ticket items, big projects in the 15, 16 months, but we've somehow all managed to cope with it. Now we start the process of reacclimatization, as we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, thanks, Murray. It's going to be very interesting to see what does happen, because we're all sitting here saying there are plans in place, and we're going to slowly return to the office, and we might get back to face-to-face meetings at some point. But at the end of the day, we still don't really know, do we? And something could happen. Another variant could come along. The whole thing could be thrown completely off course.
Absolutely.
Peter, have you got any other comments that you would like to share with us?
No, I don't. I just come back to the thing that it's going to evolve. We all need to be flexible. We do need to get back to face-to-face discussions, definitely. But I do think there's an element of and the anchor days kind of interesting, but I think it's a good idea. But also we need to recognise that many of us work in teams that are in multiple locations. And I think if there's one thing we have learned, is how to deal with people in multiple locations. Yeah. So, we need to have that physical interaction, but hopefully we've all got really better at virtual interaction, which probably we weren't very good at 18 months ago. And I think that's maybe a good learning, is how do we use those? Because we're going to be using the two together. So how do we use them most effectively? And I think perhaps sort of a bit less rigidity, and I think fluidity is good, but I get your point, Tim, that you need to have some standards around it, which is, you need to give people some flexibility, but you also need to make it such that everyone's treated fairly.
Tim, do you anything you want to add to any of that?
Well, I just the other topic you just touched on at the beginning, which I think is quite interesting and it's relatively new, is in the States. There are more and more companies now saying you can only come back if you have been double jabbed, double vaccinated. And inevitably what happens in the States will happen elsewhere. And, I wonder how ready organizations are in the UK and in Europe to handle the employment issues of that, because this effectively is a change of condition of employment by the back door. And there's some fairly, especially in continental Europe, strict employment law that might not accommodate that very well. And then, of course, what do you do with the people who don't want to be vaccinated, etc.? Do you put them in on another floor? Do you tell them to stay working at home? And then all of the issues that may bring. So I think it's something to be aware of and for people to be thinking about, because if it's already happening in the States, inevitably the have you been double jabbed issue will arise in the UK and beyond.
Just purely personal, but actually I think it'll be really difficult for that to happen in UK and Europe. So as you say, I've seen it. We've all seen it happening in the US. I'm not hearing anyone in the UK saying that actually that's going to get implemented. because it's too difficult from an employment law perspective, and the same in Europe. So I don't know whether maybe some of the US firms will try and bring that across, but I think it's very hard.
But it could, I mean, the consequences could lead to some kind of, discrimination accusations, and I'm not allowed in a meeting because I haven't had my tabs, and those sort of things. So I think it's just something to be aware of, and people to be, for the people who need to think about these things, it's probably worth having that on their radar if it's not.
Okay, we do have one question here, which I will pop up to you. You can answer if you wish. Do the panelists feel that remote working technology might be a significant benefit to folks currently being overlooked in the north of England? I did note somewhere, was it Google, I think they're saying, or Facebook, somebody like that was saying it's going to all depend. They're going to pay people according to where they live rather than where they work and everything else. That could be quite a challenge, couldn't it?
Is it just as a sort of, maybe not to take the bait in the question completely, but I think it will lead to opportunities to hire people from different places. I think that's very clear. And actually, we've already started to do that. And actually, to a certain extent, the other way around, because most of the people in the business that I work for sit in Edinburgh, and we've had some skills that we found it a little bit of a challenge. So we said, well, actually, let's hire those people in London. Because, if we've got and it tends to be if it's something that's quite a specific skill. And I can see the same in reverse. So I do think it does clearly open up some opportunities to access a much, much broader pool of talent within regulatory limits. So, for example, as a bank, it would be very difficult for us to hire somebody from outside the UK to take part in a regulated industry in the UK. Because it may be considered outsourcing, but within those things, I do think it does open up opportunities.
Yeah, Richard, I would agree. Outsourcing regulatory requirements aside, it's another conversation that needs to happen in the coming months. Like yourself, I won't say how many years. But I've been around the industry a long, long time and seen a lot of change and a lot of drift from the UK and Europe. Brexit aside, there are many conversations to have. You've got the obvious, you've got the New York rate of living. You've got the London versus a Manchester or versus an Edinburgh. Rate of living, etc. All these conversations, if somebody's doing the exact same job in London as they are in Manchester or Edinburgh or Budapest, why do you have those differentials? So I think HR in all companies are going to be somewhat busy in the coming months and maybe next couple of years until all settles down. And don't forget, it's not going away. The COVID is not going away. So, well, goodness knows.
No, thanks for that, Murray. No, it's not going away. It might be interesting to come back and view the recording of this in 2 or 3 years' time and find out exactly where we are. But anyway,
sure.
So we're going over our 40 minutes runtime, which was what I was aiming for. Let me just ask if any of the panelists got anything else that they want to add. Tim, Peter, Murray, anything else you want to contribute? No?
The only thing I wish I'd added right at the very end there is that, and this is global, so this is not about the the accepted first world business centres. Clearly, a number of the providers, a number of the banks are very reliant upon large operations in India, Bangladesh, etc. That in itself has been an interesting experience. Particularly related to the technology capabilities initially, and then as we saw, incredibly credible pictures and scenes and stories from our own colleagues in India about the family members, some of the tragic circumstances that ran for a number of weeks and are far from over, to be honest with you. So that, again, it's another huge dynamic. The banks have been so reliant on these certain centres.
Indeed, yeah. Thanks, Murray. Anybody else want to contribute anything, or shall I just thank everybody for attending, and thank my fellow panelists, to Tim, Peter, and Murray for joining us today. It's much appreciated. And for Fiona for failing to find how to do the polls in the background there.
Oh, ouch.
Thanks all for coming. Yeah, I know, it's all right. I'll apologise for it later.
I hope so.
Okay, thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you all. Take
Very much.
care now.
Bye now.
Thanks, Richard, Fiona.